Now that we've got a story trailer and a few hints here and there in radio broadcasts and websites, I guess it's time to make wild speculations about the game's plot, which are my favorite kind of speculations, obviously. So, let's dig in. We'll start with Frank Stone, the character. It seems that he was originally from Arizona, likely born sometime in the 1920s, and his family was killed in a fire when he was a boy, a fire that injured him as well. I'm guessing he started the fire, and this is a bad seed type of situation. Then, for years afterwards, he was haunted by visions of the entity, and the idea that it wanted blood and terror to feed on. This gradually caused him to develop a plan to become the entity's weapon, as the picture suggests, a creature that would cleanse the world. There's no hints yet about what he's planning to cleanse it from. Is there some sin he's railing against? Hopefully we'll learn more about his character soon. His parents aside, we've seen a reference to 5 of Frank Stone's victims: the Calhoun's son, his friend Joyce Barton, and the widowed Dorothy Clay, all of whom were burned after being killed. Perhaps that's part of the cleansing ritual? Now, we don't have any specific details about their deaths, but Frank's journal refers to a D. Parker and an E. Kessler that are presumably among his victims. So that's 5 dead people we know about. Is one of those people the owner of this ribcage, or the guts that were scooped out of it? We can't say for sure, but I'm guessing it's another person, which brings us to 6. And here's a severed head, which takes us to 7. Honestly, I feel like his body count is definitely going to be in the double digits. At some point, Frank kidnaps a baby, likely a boy based on the dialogue.
Think that belongs to the boy you're looking for?
Which triggers this officer's search for the killer. The search leads him to the Cedar Hills steel mill, where a confrontation with Frank Stone ensues. Given that this image appears to be Frank Stone standing over the basket with a baby in it, that confrontation is probably an intense one. This is where guesses have to get really wild, as we have almost no evidence to base this on, but I think at some point Frank loses this fight and is grievously injured in some way, causing him to flee and wind up in the fog, pulled out of time into the entity's dimension. Of course, this raises the question of what people think happened to Frank Stone. If he wasn't jailed and there was no body, would people think he was still on the loose? Are cops out there searching for Frank Stone for the next 15 years? Probably not. This is a steel mill after all, so if the cop wants to cover up what he saw, it's just a matter of saying that Frank fell into a furnace, and there would be no reason for anyone to question it. The cop rescuing the child would be the end of this section of the timeline and story. I don't know if we're going to be playing these in order or jumping from timeline to timeline and character to character, but this seems like a logical place for the 1963 story to wrap up, with Frank Stone's reign of terror ending. Then we jump 17 years to 1980, with a group of friends trying to break into filmmaking by putting together a horror film set in the abandoned steel mill in town. I don't know where they got the money to do this, but apparently they've got enough funding to make crew shirts with the movie's logo on it, so maybe one of their dads knows a dentist with some spare cash to invest? The 17-year gap seems significant, as it is the exact right amount of time for the presumed baby in the basket to grow up to be one of these characters. We don't know what they're named just yet, although this guy is probably Mr. Rivera. If the murder mill that's listed on this poster is, in fact, the same movie that they're making, then it's a good probability that we've got at least some of the characters' names. The poster suggests that he's named Robert Greene, and then we've got Christine Gordon and Linda Castle to divvy up between these 3. Unfortunately, the final 2 names are obscured, but it seems meaningful that there are 5 places for names on the poster and 5 characters we know about. Based on the font, this might be a J-U here, suggesting a Julia or Julian, but the last name is completely blacked out, and the final name is just nothing. There's no director listed, sadly, but the producers Newcomb and John Stone, which as you can see is spelled very unusually with an E at the end, just like Frank Stone's name. Here we can see maybe Robert arriving at the steel mill with the cop, who I'm guessing is the same cop as earlier, only 17 years older, and with a much less awkward uniform. Does this suggest that they're father and son? Could the cop have been looking for his own kidnapped child? That would certainly amp up the drama right at the end of that 1963 section. While exploring the factory, we get a look at Frank's secret room for hiding his victims' corpses, and it's mentioned that the cops somehow didn't find it.
I don't think the police ever found this place.
Which is explained if you're paying attention. Apparently someone, probably Frank Stone, walled up the secret room, and the only way that the characters are able to get into it is by traveling through a suspended train car into a broken wall. Does this mean that we're going to get an environmental puzzle where the characters have to fix a Dead by Daylight generator in order to power up the crane, then swing the train car over to smash the wall open? That would be more entertaining than if it just starts out pre-smashed, I'm thinking. While exploring the mill, characters can get injured or killed. Here's Mr. Rivera's dead body lying on the ground, and the director getting her shoulder pierced by what looks like a jagged piece of metal off of that structure behind her. The trailer intercuts this with her filming something, but as we can see, when filming she's wearing a backpack, and when stabbed she's not, suggesting it happens later on. Also, I think this injury is maybe both survivable and avoidable, since we can see her here with a bloody shoulder still walking around. And here she is filming the strange anomaly with no injury. Now, of course, the strange anomaly could be earlier in the game, but it kind of looks like a climactic event, doesn't it? Now we have to ask the big question. Are they being attacked by Frank Stone while making their film? Is this footage of him returning from the entity's realm, which is not something we've got a history of characters being able to do? We know someone is watching the characters and someone is killing people, but we don't actually have any footage of Frank in the 1980s setting, the way we do for the 1963 segments. The closest we have is this hallway, which might be 1980, and this image of what seems to be an older Frank with white hair and stubble in the final seconds of the announcement trailer. Now, if this is Frank, then obviously he didn't get pulled into the entity's realm back in 1963, which is going to raise a lot of questions about where he's been for 17 years. Is this the Halloween-style story of somebody breaking out of jail and going back to his old town to kill again? Or is the killer in the 1980 section someone who's found Frank's journals and is recreating his crimes? That would be quite a turn, and provide yet another possible meaning for the phrase, casting Frank Stone. Speaking of wild theories, here's one. I suspect Goth Gal may serve a strange role in the game. What if she can't be killed? Here's my logic. The game seems to be broken up into 3 sections. The crimes of Frank Stone, people making a movie about the crimes of Frank Stone, and someone watching a movie about the crimes of Frank Stone. If the movie doesn't get released or completed in some way, then the 3rd section of the game can't happen. But since this is a choice-based supermassive game, it would be weird if one of the main playable characters was forced to survive. Like, even if it's a little difficult to get a party wipe in some of their games, it's always possible. But if all of the filmmakers get killed in Section 2, how is anyone watching the movie in Part 3? That could explain the presence of this character, who seems to be a part of the crew, but doesn't seem to be a playable character. What if she's in the story to provide a narrative guarantee that the film will be completed, since she survives and carries the footage out, even if everybody else dies? Which brings us to the final section of the game, which seems to involve a woman being haunted by dreams of the entity's realm, just as Frank Stone was, who then attends the disastrous screening of Murder Mill featured in the 4th Frank Stone radio broadcast. My operating theory so far is that whatever aspect of the entity that comes out of the concrete here in 1980 gets captured on film and it's replayed for a huge audience, once again some kind of dimensional portal is opened, allowing the audience to be affected by one of the killers. Apparently both the Unknown and the Doctor can drive people insane, so they have a bunch of options for what could be happening here. The most likely explanation is that this character will wind up pulled into the entity's realm during the riot at the theater, making her the associated survivor character who gets sold, along with Frank Stone and the Cedar Hills Steel map, when they're all bundled together, probably in December. That said, it's entirely possible that this observer's tower ring and scene of her leaving marks in the woods are just more dreams she's having. There's no way to be sure just yet. The biggest mark against this theory is that it's not clear how they're going to craft a satisfying ending if this woman does get pulled into the entity's realm. After all, once you're in, you stay in. So while it would be super interesting to have a cinematic, QTE-filled sequence of her being chased by a now immortal Frank Stone inside a strange, warped version of the steel mill, will audiences be happy when the game ends with the player character endlessly fleeing through a cornfield, perhaps reunited with the other characters who were killed earlier in the game? Actually saying it out loud, that might actually be a little fun. Or is it possible that the game is structured completely differently than I'm imagining, and the woman going to the movies is our main character, through whose lens we're viewing the rest of it from, with all the rest of the sequences being shown as flashbacks? There's a lot of ways they could be taking this, and it's fair to say that I'm here for all of them. Hopefully we'll get more concrete news, or at least a few more radio broadcasts, soon. But until then, I've been the Hidden Object Guru. Thanks for watching. If you had a good time and you'd like to see more, there's buttons coming up to help with that. Questions, your own theories about Frank Stone, comments, go in the comments section below the video. If you'd like to have a horror game you can play right now, my game, Clown in the Woods, is free over at itch.io. Link in the description. We'll see you back here for more Frank Stone news as available, but until then I'll say that's right. Au revoir.